Okay, and as it is now 1:02, we will get started because we have a lot of information to share. We want to make sure that you can take advantage of everything that we have to talk about today. So hello and welcome to today's webinar. It's intended to review what we know and what we don't know about the OB3 regulations, have a discussion of private lenders and preferred lender lists, and provide some feedback on what schools can do now to prepare for July 1 when the OB3 changes take effect. This webinar is brought to you by the Higher Education Loan Coalition, also known as HELC. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Melissa Coons, and I am the most recent past HELC chairperson. So today's agenda will introduce you to HELC, and in a moment, we will also introduce you to today's webinar panelists, who will guide this conversation in 4 parts. The OB3 and what we do and do not know, a review of the private loan market, discuss the concept of a preferred lender list, and then discuss what schools can do now to prepare for July 1. We will also have time at the end for questions, answers, and next steps. And while the chat function is not enabled for this webinar, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A portion of the webinar, and we will attempt to answer your questions as the webinar progresses. Next slide, please. So who is HELC and what do we do? Next slide. Thank you. HELC is a grassroots network of financial aid practitioners representing all sectors of schools whose mission is to support students and their families who need to borrow funding to support their higher education goals. How do we do this? We advocate for the efficient delivery of loans to all students with the Department of Ed, and we have created a communication network to facilitate information sharing on loan program administration details. We also work to educate whoever will listen on the benefits of student lending, but most importantly, we promote and advocate for policies that minimize the need to borrow while ensuring loan protection policies for those who do need to borrow. Our website is located on the prior slide if you want to explore more about HELC. Next slide. Now, on to the program, and let's introduce our Part 1 panelists. As a reminder too, an automatic email will go out to all of our participants today that will allow you to access the presentation and slides. And I do believe, that email will go out tomorrow. So please look for that email in your inbox so you can access all of our information that we are going to review today. Now, to introduce our panelists, I will call them out one by one, and they can give you an introduction of themselves and what they do in their day job. Daniel.
Great. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Daniel Barkowitz, and I am Assistant Vice President of Student Financial Assistance and Employment at the University of Miami. We're the ones who are in Coral Gables, Florida, not the one in Ohio. So that is my role. I'm thrilled to see all of you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Daniel. Rachel Gordon.
Hello, my name is Rachel Gordon. I am the Vice President of Student Financial Aid Services at the American University of Antigua College of Medicine, part of the Manipul Education Americas group, and I'm delighted to be part of this presentation today.
Thank you, Rachel. Katie, please.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm Katie Conrad, and I am the Executive Director of Scholarships and Financial Aid at Georgia Tech.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. Rachel Feldman.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Feldman. I'm a member of the HELC Executive Board until very recently the VP of Enrollment at UNC Chapel Hill and a HELC past chair. I'm just here to look at your questions and hopefully get our panelists the best of the Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. And thanks for all you do for HELC. And Elijah.
Hi, I'm Elijah Herr. I'm the Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships at Oregon Health and Sciences University in Portland, Oregon, and I'll be leading you through the preferred lender list regulations and implementation guidance today.
Thanks, Eli.
Thank you for being here.
And with that being said, let's turn this presentation over to Part 1 to our panelists.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. And if you're not going to be a panelist for this section, I'd welcome you to turn your camera off. Just so you know as well, we're also going to be joined by a number of our lending partners and key leaders in the lending marketplace. We'll introduce them when we come to section 2. So I know one of the questions that came up, Katie, already was how do I get a copy of what we're going to talk about? I did paste into the chat a link to the Google Drive with a link to the information we're going to share today. So Katie, I understand you have an alter ego. You're not just Katie Conrad, you're also a superhero, or at least you have some other identity. But before we reveal that identity, maybe we should identify that we are presenting to you today what we know, or at least what we think we know, or at least what we hope we think we know, or at least what we think we hope we think we know, and that probably something we say today won't be accurate because we are well in advance of final rules. So this slide is sort of joking but very serious, in that we would like you to know that we're giving you the best information we have today, but don't quote us on this tomorrow, because things will be clarified or changed likely by the time we get back to this. But do you want to introduce your superhero identity, Katie?
Sure, Daniel. I am also known as Katie Cashman.
And I am Daniel Moneyman. And together we have a top 10 list to rival, I think, the best of David Letterman's top 10 list. I'm also realizing, I think when I shared this, I may not have shared the sound. So let me make sure. There we go. I'm going to share my computer sound. And let's do a little intro for those of you. Some of you might be young enough not to know who David Letterman was when he was a talk show host, or even know what talk shows were. But here is our David Letterman top 10 list.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's tonight's top 10.
So we have written a top 10 list of what you may have missed from Moby 3. Katie, kick us off.
All right, drum roll, please. Number 10, information is limited. And what we mean is our loans. So information is limited, and we also have new loan limits. So let's talk about what's changing. Grad Plus loans will be eliminated for new borrowers. So that one's easy. Graduate unsubsidized loans will be limited to per year $20,500. So that's not changing for grad students. What is changing is the $50,000 per year for professional students. And we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. Parent Plus loans will have an annual loan limit of $20,000. Additionally, there's some changes to the aggregate loan limits. $100,000 for graduate students, and that will not include any loans that they borrowed as undergraduate students. For professional students, the new aggregate limit is $200,000, and that also does not include anything they borrowed as an undergraduate student. Now we have aggregate limits and also lifetime limits. So you're going to have to distinguish between the two, because now we have a $257,500 lifetime limit per student, and that would not include anything that they borrowed as a Parent Plus loan. But then for the Parent Plus aggregate limit, it is a $65,000 limit, and that is per parent, or I'm sorry, per student, not per parent. So each student could have a Parent Plus loan borrowed at $65,000.
Right. And just to be clear about sort of how this all plays out, right? So $20,000 is the annual limit, presumably per calendar year. So if you have a student who repeats as a freshman and then is a freshman again, and then God forbid, maybe a freshman again, every year of that would be $20,000 if they still qualify for aid. And once you hit that $65,000, because as we know, 20,000 times 4 equals $65,000. They would no longer be able to access Parent Plus loans any longer at that point. Is that your fair understanding?
That is my fair understanding.
Yep. Okay.
That last year will be even more limited.
Yes. Yes. Especially if they borrowed the max as they've gone along. Okay. So let's see. let's go to, and I'm sure we'll come back. There'll be questions about this, and we're going to move fairly quickly because we have a lot to present to you today. But let's go to number 9, and I'll ask for, again, a drum roll, please. As we all know, the opposite of a professional student is an amateur student. By the way, it's hard to do these sessions when you can't hear people laughing, Katie, but I'm going to assume that people think we are hysterically funny.
I'm sure they're laughing.
I'm sure they're.
If they're not laughing yet, they will be later.
That's correct. Okay. So what do we mean by this? So Katie mentioned a graduate student and a professional student. What exactly is a professional student? You would be okay by not really knowing, because although it's been part of statute since the very beginning, it really hasn't meant anything. There's been no repercussion of being a graduate or a professional student. As part of the negotiated rulemaking, there were some definitions that were reached about what is going to be considered, or what the committee recommended and agreed on in consensus would be considered as professional student. And I just, it's a long definition. We will share, as we've said, these slides with you, but we wanted to highlight a couple of things here. Number one, that it has to be something that brings you into practice in a given profession, like a lawyer, like a doctor, like a psychiatrist, like a clergyman or woman, and it has to be skills beyond what you normally require for the bachelor's degree. It is at the doctoral level and requires at least 6 years of post-secondary education, which includes at 2 years of post-baccalaureate level commitment. And it also generally requires licensure, and it has to match the agreed 4-digit program SIP code. I'll come back to that in a second. So there was a list of particular programs that were published. You can see the list here under section 2. For those of you that are from law schools, I just want to say a word about LLB versus JD. First of all, LLB is a bachelor's degree, not a doctoral degree. So why is it there? Well, until about the mid-60s, lots of students graduated from law schools with an LLB until JD became the standard in the US. So this is just language we think that was picked up from the initial law, HEA, passed in 1965 as amended. It does not refer it's not meant to refer to the LLM. The LLM is a master's program, not a doctoral program. So our read of this is that an LLM program would likely not qualify for the extended program limits. They'd be held to the smaller graduate program limits. So again, you can see from this definition sort of where we're at, and this is going to be very hard for you to see, but this is the list of programs and SIP codes that are particularly relevant. So what I would do is check with your grad programs to make sure they're using one of these associated SIP codes. For example, if your clinical psychology doctoral program uses the 422800 general SIP code, that is not an acceptable SIP code. And by the way, what does SIP stand for, Katie?
This wasn't part of the presentation, Daniel.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I'll do it. It's the classification of instructional programs. That is what SIP stands for those of you who don't know. This is what we've been using as part of gainful employment as well. So SIP, not ZIP, but that is where all of this is coming from. Again, psychology was added, and you can hear more about this. I'm sure NASPA has talked about this on Off the Cuff and other sources. But this is the list of relevant SIP codes that are being used at this point. Okay. What happened to my drum roll? I don't know what happened to my drum roll.
I don't know, but we'll pretend like it happened.
It happened.
And we'll say number 8, legacy borrowers are now officially considered vintage, which sounds classy until you realize it just means they're still paying off loans from the same era as flip phones and low-rise jeans.
Again, I'm going to imagine
I know they're laughing, right? Because that one was really funny.
That was funny.
Okay, so who will qualify as a grad plus legacy borrower? 3 big key points here. Students with direct loans prior to July 1st, 2026. The loans have to be made prior to that date. And there's a bit of confusion on what making a loan means, whether that means being dispersed by the school, if it's accepted disbursement on COD, has it been credited to the student account? What we know is that it means made. A loan is made. We'll have to see what the official guidance on that is. So what if the loan is borrowed and paid off? My understanding is that it was still a loan borrower, even if the loan was paid off. Do you agree with that, Daniel?
Yes,
Okay.
that is our understanding.
And does any balance count? Can I borrow $1 and still be considered a direct loan borrower? You may have an institutional policy to have a limit, a minimum borrowing for like $50 or so set up in your system. But our understanding is that there is no minimum loan amount. So $1 would count if you wanted to make a loan for $1. Does any loan count, unsubsidized or a grad plus loan? Yes, any direct loan counts to qualify as the legacy borrower. They have to maintain their current program, so they cannot change degree programs. Dual degree programs, what does that mean? So if you have a JD student and an MBA student, the same student completing both degrees at the same time, what does that mean if they're going back and forth taking classes between the two programs? 3-2 programs or 4-1 programs. An example of that is you're completing a bachelor's degree in addition to your master's degree all at the same time. Does that count? What if you start at one school and then transfer into another school? That we know for sure that doesn't count. You have to maintain your enrollment at the same institution. The students, legacy borrowers, they qualify to finish their program in 3 years or whichever comes first. So they can borrow as a legacy borrower for 3 calendar years or until they finish the program, whichever comes first. Qualified leaves of absence are acceptable in this. Withdrawing or ceasing enrollment does not count. You are allowed to have the summer off. That doesn't count toward your consecutive enrollment. And again, all of these are calendar time, not academic year. So we're not saying you have 3 academic years of eligibility. It is 3 calendar years. Did I cover everything there, Daniel? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I have a lot of hypotheticals. So there are a lot of hypotheticals, and I just want to say there are a lot of things we don't have the answers to yet. So a couple of things. One of the things that we found out yesterday, Katie, is if I'm a legacy borrower, that means I qualify for all the legacy limits, including while I get Grad Plus, if I'm a professional student, I get the lower $20,500 unsub limit. So that's important to know, because if I'm legacy, right, I'm still legacy, and I'm also, because I'm legacy, I'm subject to the old aggregate limits, because there have been questions about that have come through the Q&A. So again, just keep in mind, and we're trying to get to as many Qs as we can, but just remember that, legacy means legacy for everything. These new limits don't apply to you, and you can get into the legacy just by having some kind of balance or loan that was made in the current program. So the other piece that I think is important is this dual degree programs. There's some language around making sure in a dual degree program that you have to be at least 50% in the higher limit category to be able to get the higher limit loan. There's a lot that's unclear here. There's a lot that's going to have to be clarified. So we're missing a lot of answers, but dual degree programs, just know they're on the docket for more clarification, and we'll have to wait to see what comes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Parent Plus legacy borrowers, basically all the rules that we just talked about, but a couple of things are a little bit different for a Parent Plus legacy borrower. The parents whose students have borrowed a sub or an unsub loan will qualify. So it isn't the parent, but if the student themselves have been a direct loan borrower, the parent would qualify as a Parent Plus legacy borrower. My understanding is that if the parent themselves have borrowed a Parent Plus loan for that student, even if the student has chosen not to borrow a loan, that the parent would still be considered a legacy borrower. I'm not sure that we've actually seen that in writing anywhere, but it makes a lot of sense. So one would hope that that's the way it's going to be. A change of major at the undergraduate level is not considered a change in the program of study. That we're very thankful that during NEGREG this got sorted out, because having a student who changes a major will no longer now disqualify the student from, or the parent from, being a legacy borrower. They're allowed to change majors. It's just the actual degree, the bachelor's degree, the Bachelor of Arts, the Bachelor of Science degree. All of the other rules that we talked about still apply to a Parent Plus legacy borrower as it did for the Grad Plus legacy. So the 3-year limit, the leave of absence options, and they have to be consecutively enrolled.
Right. So just a question. There are lots of questions about leaves of absences in the Q&A. Just a reminder, leaves of absence mean a federally defined leave of absence, which includes being able to resume your coursework at the same point you left it. So many of us don't have federally approved or designated leaves of absence. If you allow a student to leave, come back and start again, that is not a leave of absence unless they can start again at the exact point that they left. So I would look for the federal definitions of leaves of absence. Also, I've been asked by our moderators, if please only put questions in the Q&A, not any chat messages. Those are distracting and hard to manage because we've got a lot of questions coming through. Also, a reminder, there has been no change to the dependent or independent loan limits for undergraduate students. So the unsub limits remain the same. If a parent's turned down for plus, students still get their unsub. None of that is changing. That is all still what it was. Okay. I think if I remember, we're up to number 7. So drum roll, please. OB3 says everything must be ready by July 1, 2026, which is adorable. Like telling a toddler to clean your room and watching them proudly shove everything under the bed. So I've heard from a lot of folks, well, we're hoping this isn't going to really happen July 1. It's really happening July 1. So I just want to be very clear, not to burst your bubble, but I would not be hoping or pinning your hope on this being delayed. I've also seen and heard, well, the final rules weren't published by November 1, so that means we're not going to have to follow these rules by July 1. Well, no. The secretary can issue a waiver to the master calendar, and I'm sure that's going to happen in this case. So a couple of reminders here. So the law was signed on July 4th, 2025, and it had a set implementation date of July 1. NEGREG for the RISE committee, which is the student loan portion, completed late September, October, and November. They came to consensus. We're waiting for the notice of proposed rulemaking, which does have to be published. They'll have public comment open for 60 days, and final rules have to address the public comments, but the rules can be published anytime prior to July 1, as we're assuming, the master calendar is going to be waived. So we are of the assumption that this is all coming into pass as of July 1, and you should be planning for that. You should also be planning for a limited amount of time to understand what the rules will be. I've heard it could be as early spring, but we don't have a defined date yet because there hasn't been an issuance of the final rules, but keep your eyes open. Number 6, again, I lost my drum roll. Loan proration is now officially called annual loan limit adjustments based on less than full-time enrollment, which is great because nothing says student-friendly like a term that won't even fit on the form it's printed on. By the way, our new acronym suggestion for this is ALABALEFT. I think I got that right. ALABALEFT. So. Yeah, ALABALEFT. Oh, okay. So let me talk about this. Loan proration still exists. That is when a student is only going to be here for one term, and you know that in advance, and the student is graduating after one term, you can't just give them half the annual year's limits. You have to have a proration based on their credits versus what is required for that year. By the way, that still happens for someone who leaves because they graduated, whether you knew about it or not. That doesn't change. What is changing is there now is a new, I guess we are defining it as different than probation, but a new eligibility for students with loans around their year-long enrollment. So your annualized enrollment period, we could do a whole hour or two just on this one slide. So we don't have time, but I'm going to give you just a taste of this, and I'm going to tell you there are a lot of questions that we don't have answers to yet about this that will need clarification from the department. So what this means is no longer are you eligible for loans just because you're half-time or greater in a semester. The amount of loan you're eligible for is based on your overall enrollment for the year. And whether for the year you are a full-time student or whether for the year you are something less than full-time, but greater than half-time. So an example of how this could work, and this example was presented at the NEG-REG committee, is as follows. Let's say we're talking about an undergraduate student, and let's say that student is normally eligible for $5,500. They're a third or fourth year student. They are full-time with 12 credits in the fall. So they have 50% of the annual loan that they could get in fall. So 50% would be $2,750 of the $5,500 loan. So you pay them $2,750. They then drop a class. Okay, but you don't have to return that disbursement you've paid them because you've already paid it to them. At the time they were paid, they were at least half-time. They've dropped the class, so now they only really took 9 credits in the fall. They come back and enroll full-time for spring, which is another 12 credits. You add that 12 with the 9 from the fall, you get a total of 21 credits. And 21 over 24 is 87.5%. So as a result, their annual eligibility is 87.5% of the $5,500 loan, which nets them $4,813. So for spring, they can only get what they got for the $4,813 minus what they already received for fall. They received $2,750 in fall. So their spring loan would be $2,063. Couple of things. That means the 2 disbursements are uneven. That means the student's getting less than a full-time loan in spring, even though they're enrolled full-time in spring. Try explaining that to a student, because again, it's based on your overall enrollment for the year, not based on each semester. If you're confused, we don't blame you. This is confusing. This was the simple example. It gets more and more complicated as you go forward. There'll be a lot more about this, I'm sure, from NASFA, from us, from others. But just keep in mind, there's a lot more to come. We wanted to give you a taste of this so you knew this was coming. This will be an area we will be spending a lot of time, I'm sure, learning how to manage as we come forward. This is complicated by a number of factors. Number one, how do you define full-time? So graduate students don't have a fixed definition of full-time. For example, the University of Miami, some of our programs have a 6-credit definition of full-time. If you're a doctoral student, it's a 1 credit. In some of our programs, summer is a different full-time definition for graduate students than fall or spring is. What about if you're a BBA or a SAFE student, et cetera, et cetera? So there's just a lot here that is yet to be determined. Just keep in mind, this is going to be an area we're going to have a lot of guidance coming on as we move forward. Turn it back to you, Katie.
All right. Number 5. Will federal and institutional systems be ready in time for all of the OB3 changes? Absolutely. If by ready, you mean quietly whimpering in a corner while begging for another extension that we know we're not going to get. So, what systems do need to be updated? Our FAMs, our financial aid management systems, and we know that they can't actually start building those changes until we have final rules on which to build. So that's going to be a real challenge. The federal systems also need to be updated, COD and NSLDS. Who's doing the tracking of legacy and tracking of annual loan limits? That needs to be in COD. In NSLDS, who's legacy and who's considered a new borrower? How are they going to be tracking the lifetime limits and tracking the aggregate limits that are new and deciding which limits apply to which student based on their legacy status? So all of this has to be done by when?
July 1.
July 1, right? There's a lot that has to happen in computer systems when we don't have the final rules yet. So this is going to be a real challenge. And we'll move into the next one. Who's responsible for making sure that OB3 actually works? The school financial aid officer, obviously, because apparently the person who can explain R2T4, Pell recalculation dates, and SAP appeals without crying is now qualified to literally fix anything.
Whoop.
Nope. Okay, so what do we need to do and who's going to do it? ALABA left. So this is that loan proration for less than half time, or less than full time rather. And I really don't think that ALABA left is going to stick, but we had to come up with one. This is really concerning to me because it sounds like a manual calculation to me. I don't know how we would program a system to be able to do this. So there's going to be a lot of packaging of aid, repackaging of aid, and repackaging of aid. Or one might consider moving your disbursement date for loans until after your add drop period when enrollment gets locked. That creates a whole nother set of challenges and issues for students. Who's going to decide who is legacy? Who is tracking the changes in a student's program? Who's tracking who qualifies as a legacy borrower, who's borrowed a direct loan? Who tracks that consecutive enrollment, maintaining enrollment in the program? I think all of these things really point back to the financial aid office, which again is pretty concerning. Who is tracking aggregate limits and lifetime limits? Is NSLDS going to be ready for that? And obviously those limits are based on their status as a legacy borrower. So you're going to have different limits to be tracking. And then we already talked about disbursement and timing on loan disbursements and loan adjustments.
And if I move ahead, then here's an area that also is changing. OB3 limits the number of repayment programs available to borrowers, supposedly to make things easier to manage, which is great because nothing says simplicity like a reform that still requires its own flowchart, decoder ring, and possibly a support group. This is going to get short shrift in our presentation because we are running short on time on this section. But I'll just say, again, you may want to take a look at this. It's going to be in what we send you. There are a lot of repayment programs that are being phased out for new borrowers, and new borrowers will be transitioned into two programs, a standard repayment program or what they call the RAP program, a repayment assistance program. And the information's here on those programs. Again, look for more information. But essentially, the main message here is the old repayment programs are being sunset and moved into two baseline repayment programs as we move forward. The other question that's come up a lot are all the HEAL loan limits still available? So for med schools or health science programs, these programs were out there. The joke here is absolutely right next to the Perkins Loan Vault, the Pell Grants for summer 1997, and all the other federal programs stored safely in the Museum of Financial Aid that no longer exists. HEAL loan limits did allow unsub loan extensions for students in those programs. If you are a legacy student, you still will qualify for the HEAL loan limits, but after you're done being a legacy student, those HEAL loan limits are now expired. There are no additional loans that are granted to students in medical programs. They now come to an end. So again, just remember the end of 3 years or the end of their program, whichever comes first if they're a legacy borrower. Okay, and moving on, our last and probably best one, Katie, I'll leave to you.
Drum roll, please. Number one, how do we know we'll get through OB3? Because financial aid offices have a superpower. When things get tough, we just quietly form a circle, summon caffeine or other beverages, and manifest solutions out of sheer willpower and collective panic. If that's not magic, we don't know what is. As long as we stick together, OB3 doesn't stand a chance. So a little bit of humor, or at least an attempt at humor, but we will get through this. Hang in there. There's still a lot of questions. We're going to have answers eventually, and we'll figure out how to implement it.
Great. Katie, last but not least.
We do have a list of resources that we use to put this together. A lot of these are dynamic, so please feel free to visit NASFA's OB3 page. Has a lot of good resources, including their flow chart and a few other charts. Now, Department of Education's NEGREG page also has all of the details from that and some summary articles. So those resources are available to you. Please monitor those sites because they are frequently updated and will be updated with all of the latest information when it becomes available.
Great. Okay, Katie, thank you.
Thank you.
I know we have a lot of questions. We are just at about 30 minutes in our section. So what we may do is hold those questions to the end. Katie, I know you're not going anywhere, but I do want to be fair to our next set of panelists. So I'm going to transition us now into our part 2 section. By the way, we could have done a 2-hour webinar on each of these topics, as you can see. But I'd like to invite our panelists to come off mute so that they can introduce themselves. And that includes the folks who are coming now, and you'll see their pictures here on the slide. I'm going to do this. I'm going to allow you or invite you each to introduce yourself. Then I'm going to turn off the share screen so we can actually see you all together on video as we have our conversation. So, Anne, I'll start with you. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and a little bit about your background?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you on the call. I am Anne McGew, and I head up sales and sales operations for student lending at Citizens. Citizens is a traditional brick and mortar bank headquartered in New England and has been making student loans for nearly 50 years. I live in New York, in North Carolina, and I have a daughter who is a college freshman at the United States Naval Academy.
Great.
Turn it over.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's go to Joe DePaulo. Why don't you introduce yourself to our attendees today?
Hi, Joe DePaulo. I'm a CEO and co-founder of College Ave Student Loans. Our business is focused completely on student lending and serving the higher ed community. We are 11 years old, and our primary investor and owner is an $18 billion capitalized insurance company. So we bring obviously a lot of capital to the industry. It's a pleasure to be on this call, and I thank the Higher Education Loan Coalition for organizing this. And having listened to the first 45 minutes, it's daunting the amount of complexity all of you folks in the financial aid industry have to deal with. So hopefully, at least the private piece of this will be we could demystify it on this call. So again, thanks for having us.
Joe, thanks. Thank you for being here. Jeannie, let me have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Fabulous. Thank you. Yes, likewise, very excited to be here. Thank you for giving us a little time. Hopefully we can give more than we take in terms of information and help. But I am the founder and CEO of a company called Funding You. And we are a student lender, solely focused.
6012B. And that includes loans from private lenders. So all of our panelists who just gave you some great information, their products would be subject to a preferred lender list. Most loans from state agencies. We didn't hear from any state agencies today, but there are many out there. I'm sure you're familiar with them, MIFA, RISLA, others. They are required to comply with the preferred lender list unless their loans have a PSLF option. And that's defined in statute. Institutional loan programs. So if you're going to be the lender, if you're the one who's making the loan and you're using institutional or donor funds, you are not subject to the preferred lender list. There are other rules that you are subject to, but not the preferred lender list rules. Or the extension of credit from the school for less than 90 days. So those could be emergency loans. Those could be other financial instruments that don't that are very, very short term for the student. Or if you have an interest-free payment plan that is less than a year for a student, that is also not subject to the preferred lender lists. Last, though, the income sharing agreements are subject to preferred lender lists, and I'm sure as there are more exotic and innovative financial instruments that are out there, this list will either grow or shrink depending on new regulations and guidance from CFPB or other financial regulators. So what is a preferred lender list? We've kind of buried the lead here. But a preferred lender list, it allows you as a school as a covered or affiliated organization to help your students navigate the private loan market, right? And when you do that, you're going to go out and you're going to do due diligence to put together a list for your students that has to have at least two student lender or lenders on it. They can be broken up into multiple groups. So you could have an undergrad, a grad, international, DACA students, preferred lender, specific students, on and on and on. But you have to have at least two lenders for each category of student, right? You must construct your list using a process that we'll cover in some depth here in a minute, and you must annually review that list when you publish it. So you also must bear in mind that a preferred lender list is a recommendation. It's not an exclusive arrangement, meaning that you have to process a loan from any private lender or any lender that meets that definition of that we just looked at in the same time frame, in the same manner as any lender on your preferred lender list. So how do you go about putting together a preferred lender list, right? It sounds easy, but there's actually quite a bit of work that needs to go into it. So the first starting place here is 34 CFR 601.10. I mentioned this prior to this in this presentation that students must have, or that schools must exercise a duty to care and a duty to loyalty. So what does that mean? That means that you have to be as neutral as possible in your selection process. You have to have clear student-focused outcomes. You must develop some sort of a rubric or assessment criteria, and you need to document what that is in your approval and review process. And so to make sure that you're doing it in a very transparent way and that you're holding your students' best interests at the center of your process. So this is what we have put together with our legal counsel. This is an example. I'm sure there's others of this, but this is what I would recommend. Is first start with a governance committee, something that is going to draw from all areas of your institution. That includes financial aid, which is the most obvious, folks, but student services. We have a financial literacy office. It's good to get instruction because they see students more often. Even a student on your preferred lender list committee. And then, of course, your university leadership or college leadership, just because you really want to make sure that you've got a wide representation to control for bias. Then next, you need to determine how you're going to slice your student population. Is this just going to be for everyone? I mean, I think at community colleges, that could make sense. I think that if you have, as we heard from our panel, if you have high-performing, high-outcome student programs that have great placement rates and good, strong outcomes and earning potential for your degrees or certificates, you may want to separate them into their own group and pursue a different kind of loan program because you'll get benefits and then maybe have something for someone else. That's going to be up to you. You know your population, you know your data, and you'll be able to understand what makes sense for your institution. The next part of this is to develop an assessment device. You want to do this before you start soliciting information from borrowers because you want to assess all of your borrowers or lenders under all of the same exact criteria, right? And you don't want subjectivity to say like, oh, well, I don't like that lender, so we're not going to look at them. You want to be as open as possible or as fair as possible and as neutral as possible. And there's some ways to do that, right? This is classic sort of grading of assignments, right? Scoring rubric, possibly a ranked voting process, checklists or weighted averages of balanced options. Whatever you do, I strongly recommend whatever assessment device you come up with, run it past if you have a learning or assessment center. run it past your colleagues in instruction. It's just another check on the system to make sure that what you've created is a fair rubric and is really going to get to kind of the things that you care about the most, right? And so, what do you care about the most? Well, this is a long slide. There's a lot of information here. We heard our panelists speak of some of this. FICO scores, interest rates, lenders' access to capital, how much liquidity do they have? But there's a lot that goes into this. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, and we could go down each of these and how to assess these. We could talk about where to look for information, how to share information, and how to gather that information. But like ultimately, it's going to be up to you to decide what makes sense for you on this list and well beyond it. In the interest of time, I want to make sure that our final section has some time to talk to you guys. We're not going to go through all of this information, but I think this would be great to talk more about or to investigate again with your team. Okay, keep going. Hold on, I got a question I need to read. I don't know. I got a question from NASA about creating a standard RFI. I do not know if NASA is creating a standard RFI process. This is what's worked for us, and this is what I think is just how we would recommend moving forward with this. Okay, so once you've got your rubric, you understand what dimensions you are planning to assess, and you're like, okay, we feel very good about this. We know what we're going to prioritize in terms of our rubric, and we're ready to go out with a request for information, an RFI. You're going to write out basically a request to all the borrower or all the lenders for information derived from what you put onto your scoring rubric. And the elements of that. So basically, this is a request. You're going to send it out to all of the people that you've identified that you want to speak to, and you're going to say, "Hey, here's some information about our students." So there's a preamble. It says, "Hey, this is our school. This is kind of what we do." You're going to provide information on the student groups that you've identified that you want to create discrete loan products for, or you want to create preferred lender lists for. And you're going to want to make sure that you're sharing whatever information you're comfortable sharing, like so head counts, how many students are in each of these sort of buckets, what kind of dollar amounts, what's their lending volume, what's your graduation rates, your cohort default rates for Pell or no, sorry, your cohort default rates for plus, sub, unsub, and your placement rates if you have programs that do require placement or have other kinds of ways of measuring their entrance into the marketplace. Again, this is all aggregated data. It's going to be de-anonymized, but you want to make sure that you're getting enough information out to the lender so that they can make a good assessment about what products make the most sense for you. You're going to want to make sure that, hold on one second, if you go back real quick, you're going to want to make sure that there is a correspondence between what's on your rubric and what's in your RFI, right? You need to request the information that you're going to evaluate, because if there is no correspondence there, then your duty to care and your transparency falls apart because you're not giving lenders the opportunity to respond to what you're actually going to be assessing. Okay, next slide. Thank you. All right. Daniel has been very gracious, and he is going to share with you guys the University of Miami's RFI draft. This is public information, but it's a great starting place for folks who are going to go write their own, just to have that. And we'll send this to you when we send you the slide deck tomorrow, just so you have it as another resource from HELC to be able to develop your own RFI and process and implementation. Next slide, please. So once you've got your RFI written and your legal department's looked at it and you've got all of your data and you've made sure that it corresponds to your actual scoring methodology, then you need to identify your market segments that you want to send this to. And I think we heard a good slice of market segments today, right? We heard from large lenders like College Avenue and SoFi. We heard from mid-market lenders like Funding You. There's small community lenders that are out there that you can find through Lending Key or other community organizations. There's also state lending that I mentioned previously in the presentation, MIFA, RISLA, and then there's emergent actors, right? And this is sort of the big question mark that we don't really know, right? There's large banks, new to lending divisions, who knows what else is going to come out of a currently very fluid situation. And I would encourage you to stay for section 4 of this presentation because we're going to talk about some of that. But what you really want to think about too in your who you're going to solicit for your RFI is, does this lender have enough liquidity? Do they have a big enough market cap to meet my school's demand? What is their scoring methodology? What is the debt to income? Whatever they're willing to share with you, right? I think that there's a give and take here. I do think that risk sharing is an interesting thing that's not really necessarily covered in this, and is a separate process that we could talk about later if we have time. But I don't think that we're going to be able to get to that today. So once you have your RFI written, legals have approved it, it's correspondent with your assessment criteria. You're going to send out and you've identified who you're going to solicit information from. You need to find that contact information for each of those lenders and then send out your RFI, right? And again, we'll send you that example. You need to allow at least 6 weeks, for the lenders to respond to your RFI, or you're going to end up with a limited or partial responses. They need to do their due diligence, and especially at a time like this, there's going to be a lot of requests and a lot of information from that schools are going to be flooding into this marketplace, and we need to make sure that we give them plenty of time to be able to give you their best responses. Right when your RFI responses come in, I strongly recommend that you have a methodology or a strategy to anonymize your applications to control for bias. So, you don't necessarily want the logo and the name of the lender, you can name it after fruit or candy bars or something, but you want to control for as much bias as possible. Again, we're trying to make this as a fair, neutral assessment of true lending products as we can in order to give our students the best advice that we can, right? So you apply your assessment tool, record the outcomes and preserve that for posterity, just in case anybody asks, and select your lenders. Okay. Now you've got your lenders selected. Great. You know who you want to recommend to your borrower, or to your students and your borrowers. The next step is implementation, and there is a lot to this. There are 4 main parts of implementation. There's your website and consumer information, your lending disclosures, and we'll talk about what a model disclosure form looks like. And we'll also provide you with an example when we send out the slide deck. The self-certification form, which is a federal document that we're required to have for private lending on preferred lender lists, and then a code of conduct and training and dissemination, which anybody who has reviewed a PPA will not be surprised by the requirements that are on this. So one note, there is in statute a requirement that says that you write an annual report to the secretary explaining why you've selected your preferred lender list. That has never been implemented. They never promulgated the rule on the annual report to the secretary. So you can ignore that, even though when you go look at the statute, you will probably see mention of it, but it has never been implemented. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the website consumer information. Again, I've referenced everything for you with the citation. I'm just that kind of financial aid director. I like to go and see the actual language of the statute. So we have provided that for you. We're going to move through this pretty quickly again, because I really want to spend time for the innovation and how to prepare for July 1st with our second panelist. But the primary thing that you need to remember is that you must make sure that your students know that there's federal aid out there. There's gift aid out there, as John was mentioning before, that we want the students to take that first and to know about it. We're providing a model disclosure form for each type of loan. We'll look at that in a second. A statement declaring the process that you used. And that we have to process any private loan that any student wants, regardless of the preferred lender list. And then we have to review that annually. We've covered some of this before. And then we also need to know if the lender is an affiliate of another lender, right? So sometimes there are subdivisions of other lenders. We need to disclose that to our students just so that they know what they're getting themselves into. And then finally, prominently disclose the method and criteria for selecting lenders. This doesn't have to be super detailed, but it does have to be there. The solicitation and application of disclosures at 34 CFR 60110. So this has to be provided for students, and will be very, very familiar for anybody who's dealt with consumer information at your school. Must be provided to students in publications, mailings, and messages. Name, contact information of the lender, interest rates, example of repayment for median borrower. We'll see that on the model disclosure form in a second. Federal grants and loan available, and statement that the school must process again any private loan. I think somebody's not on mute. Okay. A justification for why these lenders have been selected, and finally a self-certification form. Next slide, please. So solicitation for disclosures by the lender. So now we're moving into something that folks may not be familiar with, which is the Truth in Lending Act. So TILA 15 USC 1638, and the subsection is E1. So these are this is information that must be provided to the student without them requiring to file an application, right? So what we need to this is our due diligence to help the student when we post our preferred lender. What do we have to tell that student about that particular loan product, right? There is a lot here. I don't think we're going to have time to go through all of this, but it is an important list, and it's one that I strongly recommend that you go back through and take a look at in order to ensure that you're getting all of that information out to the student. Again, it's all the terms and conditions of the loan, and your loan partner, your lending partner on your preferred lender list will help provide this information for you. Next slide. Now, again, there's even more disclosures that you have to have, this time from the Higher Education Act, Section 153A2, A2A and B. This is information that must be provided timely before the student makes a loan selection. So again, there's a lot of overlap here between the HEA and the Truth in Lending Act. They're not identical, which is why we included this slide. Again, you're going to see a lot of the same information that you saw in Truth in Lending, but there are some additional elements, like for example, the consequences of default, whether or not there's loan forgiveness or deferment. What does that look like, and how does that play out? Again, we're not going to go through all of this, just to know that both the Truth in Lending Act and the Higher Education Act speak to this, and it's important that you're congruent with both sets of regulations. Next slide. So this is a model disclosure form. It's considered to be a safe harbor approach. You're probably not going to be able to read much of that form just because of the size of the slide and the size of the slide and the tiny print on the PDF. We'll send you out a copy of what this looks like. And you will have that with your slide deck, and it'll be considered. Does ELM constitute a preferred lender list? No. ELM is a historical lender list. That's a different kind of question. This just came in on the our internal chat. ELM is a historical lender list, and that looks at like what students have borrowed. So this is a different animal, right? ELM is everyone, and students get to get into that. But this is specific lenders with specific products that you're recommending that they look at. Okay. So the preferred lender list here, or the model disclosure form that again we will send you, is going to have all of the information formatted in a very specific way that contains all of the data elements that you're going to need. The data elements on this form are the ones that we saw on the previous two slides. So that's going to be both the HEA requirements and the Truth in Lending requirements. Those are summarized and put into an easy kind of to read, print, and shopping sheet sort of a thing that the student can take with them and reference as they continue to compare loans. Data, according to HEA, must be provided by the lender. So that's interest rates, median repayment over whatever the term of the loan is, other conditions about, early repayment, default, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we'll send you that copy when we send out the slide deck. Next form, please, or slide, please. This is the self-certification form. This is a federal document. Again, not hard to find, but we will send you one of these. This looks very similar to probably a lot of internal forms you guys have already developed in your own schools or colleges or university. The primary information that the school needs to provide is the cost of attendance, all need-based information, or need and non-need-based financial aid the student has received. If they filed a FAFSA and you have an SAI, you'll need to provide that as well. And again, we'll send this generic copy out to you guys with the rest of the packet, or with the rest of the slide deck and the packet of information, just so you have it. Last big item here is the code of conduct. So this is HEA 487A25, and you must develop a code of conduct. This is off of your program participation agreement. that you're not going to take gifts, you're not going to package any lender up front for new borrowers, you're not going to refuse to certify a loan from somebody else. I will not get into opportunity pool loans. I will let you explore that on your own. Just wanted to flag it here. But the thing to know about your code of conduct is it may be a little bit larger than you think it is. So this will be everyone who could recommend a loan to a student. So if you're sending a student, like if somebody's in your admissions office and they're like, hey, yeah, we've got financial aid and private loans, and they're going to talk about that with potential students, they need to review this code of conduct annually, right? So you're going to need to develop what that looks like. You're going to need to ensure that they've read it, they've signed it, you retain all of that documentation, and it must be shared annually with your with any agent of your institution who may be talking about private loans with others with students, right? It also must be published on your website as part of your consumer information. And then you got to re-up every year. So make sure that this goes out annually. One way to get around this is to tell everyone at your institution, do not talk about student loans. Private student loans, refer them to our website or refer them to financial aid and an agent who can consult with them. That may be a solution that works best for your school. All right. There are some restrictions you do need to know about. Lenders may not use an institution's name, an institution's logo, some words or symbols that imply that it endorses a loan that is made by your school. That's just a heads up. I know that there were some schools in the past that have run into some issues with sharing logos, identity, and branding. So just a word to the wise, avoid that. Next slide. And then this is your preferred lender regulation index. Again, you're going to want to pull this slide up when we do send out the slide deck to you. And this will cover everything that we've talked about today. So definition of general provisions, covered institution loans to be regulated, your website disclosures, model disclosure form, more website disclosures, your self-certification form, your code of conduct, and then the Truth in Lending Act, these last three. So section 1650, there's various provisions that are echoed in the HEA. The Truth in Lending Act, 15 USC 1638. Those are the lender requirements that you may or may not need to use, especially if you're considering becoming an institutional loan school. You're definitely going to want to review Truth in Lending. And then if you're pursuing any kind of interesting or exotic lending, who knows what's going to emerge out of a very fluid situation. You're definitely going to want to review the Federal Register 102809, starting on page 55630. This is a colloquy. It's a very deep background back and forth between the Department of Education and various private lender market or lenders and various kinds of financial instruments. So be sure that you check that out if you're thinking or you run across something that isn't a private loan and it isn't an institutional loan, but you're not quite sure what it is. That's going to be your great starting place. And those three will really get you a long way into asking good questions and getting good information from whoever your partners end up becoming.
So
Thank you for your time.
Eli, take a deep breath. You deserve it. That was a speedy.
That was a lot.
It was a lot, but I'm very impressed. So I do have one question before I let you go.
Go ahead.
There's been a lot of conversation in the chat and the Q&A about a historical lender list versus a preferred lender list. Just to be clear, right? Historical lender list is those who your people have borrowed from before. Preferred would be going through this process to select a set of preferred lenders. Why would an institution want to use a preferred lender list? I know I have my answer, but what from your perspective versus a historical lender list, what's the incentive? I mean, it seems like a lot of work. Why would I want to do that? What's your sense?
That's a great question, and it is a lot of work. You're absolutely right. So I'm just going to speak from my school. We're strictly a medical school, and we've got very, very difficult and rigorous programs. My MDs are busy learning how the kidneys work, right? Do they have to learn, all the ins and outs of finance, right? Are you going to ask an incoming freshman who's 17 or 18 to navigate very complex financial instruments, understand all of the ins and outs of FICO scores and median repayment terms and how that's all going to work out? Or can we help them and do some of that work for them in a transparent, honest, and egalitarian way to help them at least give them a starting place, right? We're not the end all be all. We're not restricting somebody to go out to Elm or to go out to a historical list. What we're saying is like, hey, we've done a lot of work for you. And like you said, it's a lot of work. So either we're going to do that work or the student's going to have to do that work. And what we're saying is we have an obligation, we think, to help those students, at least give them a starting place to really make sure that they're gonna make the right decision or a good decision for their long-term financial health.
Yeah, and I'd also say, if I can add to that, I think yes, all of that is true, and it's unlikely you'd be able to negotiate a risk share with someone who, if you weren't on a or weren't making a preferred lender list, because the whole point of a risk share is, if that's where you're going to go, that it's part of the makeup of your lenders that you've identified as lenders you want to partner with, and there may be terms and conditions that you could negotiate, perhaps, that might not be available otherwise, including things like risk share and other features.
Absolutely, and you're spot on, Daniel. That we could do a whole presentation on risk share and risk share pools and how that's all put together. And there's many models out there. I think you heard some of that today. But I don't want to tarry anymore because I know that the next group is going to talk about some of this and where you should go from here. So thank you for your time and attention. I'm sorry that that was so fast, and thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Eli. And Rachel, welcome to the webinar. What do you think so far?
I think it's amazing, and I think I'm going to make room on my acronym tree for ALEBLAC.
Whatever the heck that
Yeah.
acronym was. Yeah, exactly. So right now, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Are you feeling a little overwhelmed by all the information we've gotten?
I think that we have gone over a lot, and it's time for a conversation of how
I
we can
agree.
actually implement this.
I agree. And maybe right now you're feeling like you're in fight mode or flight mode or freeze mode or fawn mode. But we're going to do a little bit of a more generalized conversation about a couple of things here. Data, briefing your leadership, making a plan. Like, what do we do with all the information we've just shared with you? What should you be doing now? And how should you be getting ready? So I've already forgotten because it's been that kind of a day, Rachel. Am I doing this slide or are you?
We can share it if you like.
Let's go.
Excellent. I like that. I think data is one of the most important things we have in financial aid. All of us are numbers people. We live in a world of data. We're constantly running reports, reviewing, re-reviewing, reconciling. And right now, it's going to be a really important time that we're looking backwards while we're looking forwards. Modeling is huge and it is imperative. And I really want to do a deep dive in this because when we're looking at financial aid right now, especially myself at a graduate professional institution, we are looking at a gap, let's be honest. And we have to figure out and define what that is. So one thing that I've done is I've ran a ton of reports. We put on here a few different examples of places that you can run them, your financial aid system, SIS. Lean on your third-party servicers. I know from just looking at the list, a lot of you work with third-party servicers. They are here to help you, and that's a segment of our industry that really, I know they want to help. I've seen their presentations and they're available for you. Another item we don't have here is the G5 reports. I love G5 reports. I love the way that they're divided, how you can see it from more of a fund basis than you can on COD. Utilize those. I personally did projections looking at it from a 5-year perspective. What's our average? And when we're talking about modeling, we really need to look at it as a realized figure. Look at you updating on the fly there, Daniel.
Rachel, I am just all about the technology in the moment. Go ahead.
Excellent. So when we run these reports, it may look like we have an increased gap, but we have to take into consideration the transitions that we have in direct and indirect costs. What's your average increase? Is it 3%, 5%? And put that into the equation and also utilize that to carry forwards. And when we're carrying it forwards, we're not just doing it once. We're doing it for every year that we're looking forwards. So let's say you have a 4% increase, just throwing it out there. You're going to take this year's figure, put 4% on top of that. Then that number for the next year, 4% on top of that. If you don't do that for every year forward, your estimations, you're going to have a non-realized gap. You're going to end up with a differential. So modeling is imperative. I personally like to look at it from a best, most likely, worst case scenario. I don't know about you, Daniel. But for me, when I'm reporting to my board, it's important for them to see, here's where I think we're going to end up. It could be better. That would be great. They might all get private loans, outside scholarships, whatever the case might be. Or we may end up in a situation where we really have a more complex situation and we have to discuss it. And I
So
put all that forwards.
yeah, so the other thing I'll say, where this data becomes really helpful, and this ties a little bit to briefing leadership. I had a conversation with an academic dean even yesterday who said to me, "Well, I'm not worried about this for my PhD program because none of them borrow." And I said, "What do you mean none of them borrow?" He said, "Well, they're all getting stipends and they're all getting tuition awards." I said, "Yes, and many of them are also borrowing." And so I was able to point out by program, right, how many students were borrowing in the programs that are PhD under this particular school or college, and said, you have 180 students who are borrowing, a million, several $1 million a year in loans. It was 12 million. That's going to be a problem for your students, and how are we going to help you address that? So modeling is absolutely critical.
It's also an educational moment for our institutions, as you just pointed out. A lot of times, people outside the financial aid office don't look at the amount students are borrowing for their indirect expenses.
Correct.
And that's the world that we live in. And it's
Correct.
really educating them about what that means and how students are going to afford that. We can find a way to cover your bill, but it's how are you going to live? For example, at medical school, you're not working while you're going to school.
Yep.
So we need to have funding to support you.
That's right. So, I mean, along the lines of leadership and briefing your leadership, I think a question that is being raised is who owns this, right? Is this a financial aid problem? Is this a VP finance or CFO problem? And my answer is to that question is we all do, but someone's got to take leadership. And at your institution, you may be in a position of leadership to help sort of drive the decision-making process here. You may not be, but if not, you certainly need to be a strong advocate and key constituent in this conversation. And part of that is making sure that executive leadership understands the institutional impact, and that's where your data and your modeling really come into play. And building a plan for moving forward. As you heard Eli talk about, setting up a committee at University of Miami, we have a committee that's certainly doing the RFI. We have another committee that's just focused on communication. We'll talk more about that later, but communication with various constituencies, both internally and externally, about what we're doing. But also, we've laid out executive leadership decision points. What information do I need from executive leadership by January? What do I need by February? What do I need by April? So that we have a timeline established that brings us to a transition point in July. And this is really critical, is understanding what are those decision points. Executive leadership doesn't want the whole process to be in. They want the summary, what the impact's going to be, and what the decision points are, and your recommendations. And so that's what we're preparing for as we get ready for next steps along our pathway.
And if I may add in there, in your plan, ensure you include training.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking about plan, right? So we talked about, are you going to use a preferred lender list like we discussed? Are you going to use a frequently used lender list? And if so, where are you getting those data from? And the idea of the wild world of lending or wild west of lending, the idea that there are a bunch of new models that we think are going to be introduced in the next 3 to 5 years, and keeping informed and keeping in track of what that looks like is going to be really important as we move forward as well.
And it's also important to honor that different schools are going to have different paths forwards here. If you're a career school, for-profit school, any form of HCM, you're going to have a very different group of lenders that you can work with than your traditional nonprofit school.
Agreed.
Speak to your constituents, speak to friends at other schools, see who they are utilizing. Make sure that you're in that same path and having those conversations, because you are going to have a more limited group.
Agreed. So part of this also is, as you think about the scope, maybe you've not had to use private lending before. What platform are you going to use to actually deliver on your certifications? Well, and there are a lot of platforms out there that different providers provide, but what is your platform going to be? How are you going to actually manage your volume? What's, to your point, the school size and scope question? What's the lender reach by school type? And what's your offer timing going to be? So, this year, I mean, we all saw the FAFSA fiasco happen as it happened. My concern this year is we don't have final rules. We're not going to have them probably until March or April, maybe if we're lucky. And by that point, many of us would normally already be making award offers for the following year. So what does that look like in terms of this year? And do we make offers ahead of time? How can we mitigate risk here by thinking creatively and being creative in what we're able to offer to students, with the potential that we have to go back and make corrections as needed as we go. But just understanding and having a plan A. I joked during the FAFSA simplification process, we got to plan double A prime because we had so many plans that we abandoned as things sort of moved. But being nimble is going to be really important, not to be so stuck on your plan that you can't respond to it as you go. I'm moving us through this quickly, I know, because we do want to get to Q&A, Rachel, but anything else you want to say about that before we move to creative solutions?
One item I'd like to add is see what you can do right now. Whether it's signing up for a different lending platform, there are items that we know. We know this is coming and we can prepare. We can train our teams how to manage through those platforms, what they look like. Start taking a look at website communications, handbooks, catalogs, etc., so that you can be in front of it in any direction we can, even though we know we have so many things we don't know. Let's work with what we do know.
That's fair. That's fair. And we also don't want to ignore the other creative solutions that might be there, thinking outside the box, right? So that might include thinking about a scholarship or grant redesign program, maybe prioritizing students who have bad credit as a condition or a precursor for a particular, what might have been a need-based fund at the undergrad level. Maybe it's a credit risk fund at the grad level. Thinking about using school as lender, we're certainly exploring that. Are we going to, for some of our students, do we have a school as lender model where we limit, for students who can't get approved from any other source, we limit their lending amount to an institutional loan that is tuition only, minus whatever other aid they might have. You mentioned this one. I thought this was fascinating. Payment plans that convert to a loan. Do you want to say a word about that?
We've spoken to several providers that are going to be either putting this product out or have just started to deploy it, where it's a payment plan. The students can say they can pay X amount over this period of time. It goes well beyond graduation. And after graduation, it turns into an interest-bearing loan where the payment plan providers are handling TILA, state regulations, etc. The school still captures the funding just at a later date. I think it's a really creative solution, and we're going to see a lot more of these as we continue to progress forwards. But it's definitely one that I'm gathering information on.
Great. Great. And we talked about risk share agreements. I also would say, if you're part of a cohort, maybe it's a group of independent colleges or a group of for-profit colleges or, the state system, your state might want to reach an agreement or look at cohort agreements as a way to think rather than as an individual actor, how can we mitigate risk across more than one institution? And are there options there? So we've talked a lot about communication. Do you want to spend a little time sort of walking through the suggestions here on communication plan?
Yeah, I think transparency is enormously important. And this has been something I've been really focusing on with my team is that we're in a time of change right now. And with that comes change management. And we need to really understand that our students, as well as external constituents, are having emotional responses to factual moments. Many of us are as well. And we need to ensure that we're having consistent and clear communication with our students, with our team, with external. We're also living in a world where there's lots of headlines, with some of it misinformation, as well as a TikTok generation. We're seeing a ton of misinformation out there. I know there are some NASFA people on this call. If you make a shirt that says, "I survived the financial aid error in TikTok," I will buy one for every member of my team. But we really need to put out facts and also honor that people are having emotions through this and support them through it. I personally just did a training for my team on change management, the emotions that come, how we deal with it, and when we get to the phase of acceptance. And I think that's something that really is important and we all need to lean into, as well as our web. We're working heavily, and I know a lot of other schools are, on what are the sections that are going to be on our website from a financial aid perspective on a go forward, because we are going to be having different populations who need different pieces of information. And we're also going to be going back to information that we may have pulled off of our website since we were in the Grad Plus era. Those of us who've been here long enough for FAFSA worksheets will know we used to have sections on our website about financial wellness. And it's time that we have to start re-exploring those, putting that information back out there, supporting our students so that they can be approved for student loans. How to pull your credit report, what is a credit score, how to fix it. all sorts of plethoras of information, and making sure it's at the fingertips and that we can just link it when we're communicating with students.
Well, and I think to your point, right, the challenge we face right now is this is now again atop of the headline news, right? So when and I'm sure many of you saw the social media posts that talked about teachers and nurses are now no longer considered professional. Well, no, again, it's not that they're not, it's that the definitions have always been that way. It's just about what the implication of that is. So again, we have responsibility in space to keep our students and our prospective students informed, and not to give in to sort of the muck that happens in the social media space, but to be the transparent truth tellers about what's really happening here. And that's an important piece. And you mentioned this before, but cross training, not just within your office, but outside your office, recognizing that a lot of the answers that are provided are not going to come from the financial aid offices necessarily. They're going to come from all of our partners who talk to students as well.
Yep, 100%.
So, part of this is how do you keep informed? And I would say NASFA and your regional and state associations do a great job. In fact, NASFA has a webinar that we didn't know was happening when we scheduled this one, but one tomorrow. And I'll be on that webinar as an attendee listening and learning. But your regional or state associations, federal updates. I've heard a rumor there may still be a federal student aid conference sometime in 2026, maybe in person. We'll see. Keep your eyes open. We'll see what happens. And then you suggested this, and I think you're brilliant to name this. While we're all focused on this issue of OB3, don't forget that there are lots of other issues that are still out there, whether that's the Office of Civil Rights and their investigations, default management, your annual budget changes that come with Pell Grants, et cetera, through the annual. We've heard rumors potentially around campus-based funding and some risks to campus-based funding. It's almost like you have to be everything everywhere all at once. But don't forget that there are other pieces that are moving at the same time.
100%.
And then I think that is there anything else before? It gives us about 8 minutes left to ask if there are questions we want to address. But anything else you'd like to say, Rachel, before we turn to generalized Q&A?
Two things. One, I'd like to say, all of us, just hang tight. Those of us who have been doing this 20 plus years, the pendulum just keeps swinging, and it's just going to keep going back and forth. We're going to get through this together. We're going to see change. This is the equivalent of FAFSA simplification 2.0. We made it through that. We're going to make it through this, and really just stay on top of attending all of the trainings that you have, whether it's NASFA, CQ, local organizations, and really making sure that we come together. I also just want to take a second to thank all the panelists who have been here today. Today was born from a small little volunteer on a listserv that accidentally took it down, and a text to a very old and fabulous friend saying, I did a thing, can you help me? And then having an organization sponsor our vision of having something open for the community, free, and so that we could give the best support we could in a short period of time. And all of the people who offered their time today to be present, thank you. And to anyone out there, always offer to give your time, and feel free to text a friend and say, I did a thing, and you'll end up with 2 hours about OB3.
Probably more information than you ever wanted to know, and also not enough. So with that, we do have some closing messages. Reminders, maybe we'll start there, Melissa, and then we'll turn to Q&A. Do you want to, maybe for those who might need to leave, do you want to, I don't know if Julie was able to join us or not, but do you want to say a word about our next steps and HELC, and then we'll turn to questions and answers?
Yes, and first I do want to address the question and answers in the Q&A section. We have answered over half of the questions that were presented to us. And please, if we did not answer your question, know that we didn't have an answer. And I'm going to say that the blanket answer is we don't know yet. So for those of you who provided situational examples or generalized questions to your school, I think we still are all waiting to hear what those answers may be. So in terms of, as Daniel was saying, our next steps, we do encourage you to join our organization. The Higher Education Loan Coalition is taking members. Why would you want to be a member? Well, the membership benefits are listed here on the slide. We provide weekly policy updates and real-time alerts. We interact with Congress and the Department of Ed and other stakeholders in Washington, D.C., that we can share that information of those conversations back with our constituents. We also train all of you on how to do Hill visits, because that's part of what we do. We go to Washington, D.C. at least twice a year and do a series of Hill visits. We partner together with a firm in D.C. called Arnold and Porter, and they have their contacts set us up with Hill visit membership. We also look at meet with other constituents such as ACE, APLU, in addition to the Department of Ed and other constituents in Washington. But together, our voices are a powerful factor when we're approaching the Department of Ed and our other constituents and the members of Congress to make sure that we have the power to advocate and to make sure that our students' voices are heard in Washington. So we encourage you to join. If you go to the HELC website, there is a section on membership. Membership is $400. And so for $400, you really do get a lot of benefits that support your students and support your institution. We will be having a follow-up webinar, which will be a panel of schools that are going to be talking about how they are, each school, going to be addressing the OB3 changes, how they are coming at it, how they are working with their leadership, their administration on impacting any changes having to do with either OB3, the preferred lender list, or a private lender list. So we encourage you to join HELC, because the follow-up panel discussion will only be available to the members that do join. As you can see, we have almost 2,000 people who wanted to join today, and the next engagement will be a little bit more of a conversation. So we encourage you to join HELC, get on our website, read the membership benefits, but we do also want to thank all of you for coming together today to hearing what we have to say. So Daniel, do you want to wrap us up with any final Q&A?
And I'll invite Katie to come back on. And why don't you stay, Katie and Elijah, stay there, Rachel, don't go anywhere. Let's see, there were some questions that came up. Katie, did you want to address the issue around calendar year? Which I said calendar year, but what I meant really was school year. Do you want to just correct that misstatement for me?
I think what we were actually trying to say, it is an academic year. It is just, the key is that you have to maintain enrollment, continuous enrollment for those 3 academic years. It's not a matter of I can do a freshman year, I can do a sophomore year, I can do a junior year. It is continuous enrollment. So I realized that we confused everybody by saying calendar year.
We like to confuse people. Yes, we do. We like to confuse people. But I think what's important to understand is you can't say, I'll do my freshman year, take 2 years off, come back and do my sophomore year, take 3 years off, come back and do, to your point, it is continuous enrollment that is critical here as a distinguishing factor. I think that's important. I also think there and Rachel Feldman, keep me honest, but I think there were questions you said around legacy for loan limits, dual degrees, and HEAL limits. Is that true? See if Rachel.
It is true. Lots of specific questions about what if people are in a dual degree and have only started one.
So we don't know, I think is probably the best answer there. I would stay tuned. There's a lot we just don't have the answers to yet coming out of that. So again, I think the other thing will depend on very much how at your institution you manage dual degrees. So there are some programs, I'll be clear, at the University of Miami, where in our SIS, you're in one program for the life of your dual degree. There are other programs we run where you switch back and forth between, for example, your MD program and your JD program. One semester you might be taking all JD courses, one semester all MD courses. In that situation, it's a little harder to say that that is one dual degree program. We book it that way, and we market it that way. But from a system perspective, every time we switch degrees, that undercuts the argument. So, I think there's a lot to be still explored here, but stay tuned. We don't have the answers, but we're trying to get them just like you are. Anything else, Anne, Katie, Melissa, Rachel, Eli. Go ahead, Eli.
Oh no, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming, and I do hope that you join HELC. It really is a great organization of actual practitioners dealing with actual problems that actually impact students. So I hope you do join us. It's a great organization.
Agreed. Agreed.
I will agree too. And Daniel, do you want to remind everybody that they will be auto-emailed the access
Yes.
to the site?
Yes, and as you saw, and as Rachel pointed out, I was making live corrections to the PowerPoint as we went along. So by tomorrow, there'll be a corrected version of the PowerPoint out. Please feel free. You'll get a response back from my email address. If you have thoughts or questions, email Katie. No, you can email me if you have thoughts or questions and you want any follow-up or feedback. Again, I want to give credit where credit is due. Rachel was right. This was really her initiative that brought us all together. Thank you to HELC for being willing to be our host. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to our panelists, to Melissa and Rachel for being behind the scenes, to Anne, to John, to Joe, to Jeannie for being willing to join us. I thought that piece was exceptionally helpful. To Katie, to Eli, to Rachel, for putting the work in to make this all possible. So thank you very much. We hope you've enjoyed today. We covered a lot in 2 hours. I feel like I need a nap, but the recording and the rest of this will be sent to you once we're through. But thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.